there anything as compelling or intriguing as the unknown? Mysteries demand answers, no matter how big or small the question may be. If something's unknown, then generally the idea is to get to the bottom of it as soon as possible. It's just not always that easy, however. Movies can leave unanswered questions dangling for any number of reasons, from trying to pick interest into a sequel to allowing the viewer themselves to extrapolate meaning. So with that being said, I'm Jem from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 unanswered questions from famous movies that are still killing us. Number 10. How did Frank Abagnale Jr. pass the bar in Catch Me If You Can? Throughout the events of Catch Me If You Can, Leonardo DiCaprio's Frank Abagnale Jr. managed to live a life as a fraud in just about every aspect. He became an expert at forging documents and at playing the system, so much so that FBI agent Carl Hanratty, played by Tom Hanks, simply couldn't keep up with him. Of the scams that Frank pulled, one saw him pose as a pilot, another as a doctor, and the third as a lawyer. For that third one, he somehow actually managed to pass the bar exam in Louisiana, something that Hanratty wouldn't drop. He needed to know how Frank cheated. Towards the end of the movie, Frank and Carl have evolved into colleagues and damn near friends, but have a history of being dishonest with each other. Truth, or rather the absence of it, was a running theme throughout the story, and while Carl lied to Frank about his family and his daughter, Frank had obviously lied to Carl about a lot of things too. Was his story about passing the bar exam just another lie? After being asked multiple times, Frank told Carl that he didn't cheat and that he simply studied for 2 weeks and passed the exam fair and square. When he was asked if it was the truth, Frank gave no answer. Aside from the fact that studying for 2 weeks with absolutely no education on the subject would make it impossible to pass the bar, Frank proved himself to be an unreliable source of information, meaning this was almost certainly a lie. Number 9. What happened to Groot's race in Guardians of the Galaxy? The Marvel Cinematic Universe is stuffed with incredible characters, from those who had their entire stories told to those who have barely had their surfaces scratched. Groot, played by Vin Diesel, is a strange one in that the character arguably falls into both categories. He's appeared in 5 movies, but while further appearances are far from guaranteed, next to nothing is known about his origins. This isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, as a little mystery is a good thing, but there are a few key conversations that raise huge questions about Groot's past. In Avengers Infinity War, Thor, played by Chris Hemsworth, reveals that he speaks Groot, as he chose it as an elective when growing up on Asgard. This suggests that there is more than one Groot, as no one would teach children an entire language to communicate with just one person. However, no other Groots have been seen or mentioned throughout the MCU, and what is more damning is that the Collector had never come across anything like him before. Tanelia Tivan based his entire existence around collecting weird and wonderful creatures, and surely if a race of talking trees existed, he would want to add this one to his collection. He proved as much when he offered to purchase Groot's carcass as soon as he met him, but how could he not know of such a race already? There must have been an entire civilization of Groots, but what happened to them to wipe them off the face of the galaxy and out of the knowledge of even the Collector? Number 8. What was David's actual plan in Alien Covenant? As a prequel to Alien, Prometheus left a lot to be desired in that it left far more questions than answers, and didn't ever particularly feel like it came from the same franchise as the original from 1979. The same could then be said about its follow-up, Alien Covenant. This wouldn't have been too much of a problem had the originally planned third entry in the trilogy come to fruition, as the opportunity to tie up any loose threads would have presented itself. However, the reportedly titled Alien Awakening will likely never see the light of day after the lukewarm critical and commercial reception of its 2 predecessors. Hence all those questions, arguably the biggest of which revolves around Michael Fassbender's David. What actually was his plan? Throughout Prometheus and Covenant, it's difficult to nail down exactly what David intended to achieve. When Covenant finished on the huge cliffhanger that it was David who was in control of the ship rather than Walter, the story could have gone anywhere. Sadly, it seems that the endgame of David's overall plans will forever remain a mystery. Number 7. Who bought Avengers Tower in Spider-Man Homecoming? Part of Iron Man's presence in Spider-Man Homecoming came in the form of Happy Hogan, played by Jon Favreau, and the fact that they were moving out of Avengers Tower. Earth's mightiest heroes had been relocated to a new facility since Age of Ultron, and Homecoming confirmed that Tony had sold the building. However, it left out the tiny detail of who he sold it to. Naturally, this became a sticking point in the MCU fandom, as does any seemingly mystery character failing to reveal their identity. There were fan theories aplenty, with one suggesting Avengers Tower may be turned into the Baxter Building by Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four, but as of yet, there have been no answers. The tower was referenced in Hawkeye several years after Homecoming, but again gave no insight into the new occupant. And while there were also theories that Wilson Fisk, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, would take up residency there for his re-emergence into the MCU, there was nothing to be said about it during his return in Echo. This question will almost certainly be answered at some point, but at this point, the 7 years since it was first posed have felt like an eternity. Number 6. What happened to the humans in Cars? After Toy Story, it could be argued that Cars is the next leading franchise under the Pixar banner. It is the only other film series with 3 entries, and Lightning McQueen, played by Owen Wilson, is both instantly recognisable and incredibly popular. There are plenty of questions surrounding the universe in which Cars is set that have not yet and likely will never be answered. How are cars made? The fact that there are cars of different ages, from children up to old men and women, suggests a reproduction cycle, but how on earth would that even work? Weirder still is the complete absence of humans. Not a single one appears throughout the series, but there is a very clear human influence. The cars are built exactly like the cars of our world, essentially to suit the needs of people, but more spooky than that is something that suggests there may have been humans at one point. In Cars 2, there can be seen both a London bus and a London taxi, as well as the school bus. All these vehicles are specifically designed to carry multiple humans, so with no humans in the universe, why were these vehicles created? They aren't big enough to act as public transport for other cars, rendering them useless, right? Unless there were once humans to which they catered, which begs the question, what the hell happened to them? Car uprising, car climate change, car nuclear war? We the people deserve answers. Number 5. What is on page 47 in National Treasure Book of Secrets? A big part of the premise of the National Treasure franchise is essentially Nicolas Cage solving mysteries and uncovering secrets. However, there just had to be one secret left as a tease for the future of the franchise, something that came in National Treasure Book of Secrets. The titular and creatively named Book of Secrets was the MacGuffin Nick Cage's Benjamin Gates chase through the National Treasure sequel, and contained big secrets from throughout the history of the United States, such as the truth about the Kennedy assassination, Area 51, and things like that. Then there was the contents of page 47, the page that the President of the United States himself, played by Bruce Greenwood, asked Ben to look over and report back. Considering the level of secret contained in the rest of the pages, this was bound to be something juicy, and it could have been literally anything. Exactly what was included, however, was not revealed before the end of the movie. Benjamin described it as life-changing, but it seems likely that it won't actually change any lives anytime soon. Much like Pirates of the Caribbean, there has been talk of a National Treasure sequel pretty much since Book of Secrets came out in 2007, but it seems less and less likely that anything will actually materialise. Thus, page 47, arguably the most tantalising secret throughout the 2 National Treasure movies, may well remain a secret indefinitely. Number 4. Was it all a dream in Total Recall? When it released in 2010, Inception took the world by storm, with its cliffhanger ending teasing whether or not Leonardo DiCaprio's Dom Cobb was dreaming in the final scene or not. However, while this question has been answered in the years since, Total Recall posed a similar question that has gone unanswered for over 3 decades. The 1990 Paul Verhoeven's film saw Arnold Schwarzenegger play Douglas Quaid, a construction worker living in a dystopian future who pays for fake memories to be implanted into his head. He wanted to believe he was a spy on Mars, and though the rest of the movie plays out to this narrative, it is never made clear whether or not the memories were truly implanted or if the events were taking place in real life. Certain clues at different points in the film suggested both potential answers, but during the 2-hour runtime, there was no clear answer given. Was Quaid really a Martian spy or not? This was the big question of the story, but it was essentially designed to not have a definitive answer. Ultimately, it didn't matter whether his experiences were real or manufactured, which leaves those looking for closure pretty much out of luck. Number 3. Who was the Thing in The Thing? There have been many names that have become synonymous with the horror genre over the years, but arguably none more so than John Carpenter. Although the best of his directorial efforts came in 1982 with The Thing, an outing that, while revelled in its day, has since become appreciated as a true masterpiece, one with a deliciously ambiguous climax at that. A story following a shape-shifting murderous alien that can take on the form of anyone around it naturally breeds mystery. When all was said and done, just McReady, played by Kurt Russell, and Charles, played by Keith David, remained, neither being able to say for certain whether the other was truly the man they knew or not. Agreeing on a truce of sorts, in the deadly freezing temperatures of the Arctic, the pair share a bottle of scotch, and the film ends without ever confirming which, if any, of the men are in reality the Thing. With an ending as wildly devastating as this, fan theories are inevitable. While the point of the Thing's ending pretty explicitly hinges on not knowing who the monster really is, cementing its themes of paranoia and destruction, that hasn't stopped those from trying to figure out if it's McReady or Charles. Some of these explanations seem pretty compelling, and with only a finite number of potential outcomes, some are bound to be right. The problem's that there's just no way to know which. Carpenter spoke about the Thing's ending as recently as October 2023 and went on to say that there is a definite answer and that he knows the truth of the mystery. However, you can bet your bottom dollar that he won't be revealing it anytime soon, even after all this time. Number 2, how much of Verbal Kint's story was true in The Usual Suspects? There have been some truly outstanding twists throughout the history of film, one of the most famous being the fact that Kevin Spacey was Keyser Söze all along in The Usual Suspects. The movie ends with this bombshell of a review, throwing everything seen over the previous 2 hours into question. Almost the entire series of events throughout the story is told through the lens of Keyser Söze, at the time posing as Verbal Kint. While being interrogated by Agent Kojin, Kint tells the story of Keyser Söze, which at first the audience has no reason not to believe. That changes before the credits roll, however. Knowing that the story is being told by Söze himself, he becomes an unreliable narrator. He could be telling Kujin absolutely anything to get himself out of being caught, and has no reason to tell the truth. The entire story about the mission to kill that one man who had seen his face could be full of lies, but was there any facet of truth to his story at all? The fact that he pulls parts of his tale from the notice board in the police station suggests that a large part of it is untrue, but there's no guarantee to what degree. Maybe he did have a right-hand man in the form of Pete Postlethwaite, since the actor does pick him up from the station at the end of the movie, but maybe the name Kobayashi was all that was taken from the notice board, or perhaps every single word of it was a lie. There's just no way of knowing. And number 1, how did Dignum know Sullivan was the rat in The Departed? The ending of The Departed is one of pure shock and adrenaline. After Colin Sullivan, played by Matt Damon, and Billy Costigan, played by DiCaprio, had been chasing and trying to outwit each other, everything came to a head. With almost everyone connected to the case, or able to point to Sullivan as the rat dead, he was able to shift blame onto Trooper Barrigan, played by James Badge Dale, another that Costello had on the inside. He had seemingly escaped justice, at least from the police force, until he returned home to see Mark Wahlberg's Staff Sergeant Dignum waiting for him. Dignum had been suspended earlier in the film and was almost forgotten about, until he returned to murder Sullivan right at the last. It's one of the most infamous movie endings we've had over the last 2 decades, but what it doesn't do is explain how exactly Dignum knew what Sullivan had done. It appeared that everything had been wrapped up in a neat little bow for Colin, particularly as there wasn't anyone left alive who had proof of his connection to Frank Costello. So how did Dignum know? There are theories, certainly, revolving around Madeline Madden, or potentially that Dignum himself was a rat, the former of the two being the most believable, but there is no solid answer, and likely there never will be.